It sounds like sociometrics is very contained. So, how are some ways that that reduces the risk of re-traumatization?
Sociometrics started on one particular day for me. I had a trainee. I tell this story like often.
Uh-huh.
He came in, there maybe were 15, 16 people in this group. He was just in a chair in the corner like this. And
Mm-hmm.
we all finally said, what is going on? And he told us, I've got 30 people, 35 people in a group, and they want me to do therapy with them. I can't. This was when the budgets in New York State got cut. So we all thought, oh, this
Mm-hmm.
is terrible. How can he do this? And when I went home, I thought, if anyone should be able to figure this out, a group therapist, sociometrist ought to be able to give it a shot. And I
Mm-hmm.
also thought, what have I got to lose? Nothing's working that he is doing. We're in a total pickle here in this state. We need methods that give people something. And the only possibility was to mobilize the member to member connection within the group.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, there's a story I thought of when I was figuring this out about the difference between heaven and hell.
Mm-hmm.
It's the story is that people in heaven and hell are both there with they both have these sticks on their arms so that they can't move their arms. And when I don't know who it was who visited hell, saw all of these emaciated, starving people walking around with sticks on their arms because they couldn't feed themselves. So they were just lost and disconnected and slowly dying. And
Mm-hmm.
then he went to visit heaven and thought, but wait, they've got the same sticks on their arms. They can't move their arms either, but they're rosy cheeks and they're healthy looking and they're happy. And how could this be? Who is feeding them? And the difference he discovered was that they were feeding each other. So
Mm-hmm.
when I thought of that, I thought there's a way that the group members should be feeding each other. If I break it down often enough, and if I create reasons to break down into small groups. So I came the next month and I had literally scrawled a bunch of feelings on pieces of papers. I crept into group. I hoped no one would find out about this. No psychodrama would find out about this because psychodrama, then it's all spontaneity. It's all, you
Mm-hmm.
can use any of this stuff. So I just didn't tell anyone about it, but I put them all over the floor with my training group. And obviously one of the papers said other, always. And this wonderful group, I can still see them today. They walked over and then I said, so say a little bit about why you're standing where you're standing. And then I started saying things like, walk over to a feeling that you don't like to feel, that you shut down, so that right there is a movement towards trauma work. That doesn't mean you have to use the word trauma, which makes people feel all anxious and shut down all over again. And then I was throwing it out to the group. What do you want to know about the group? So they are asking all these criterion questions. And before my eyes, I saw the possibility of a long healing process where people were healing each other because they were sociometrically aligned according to feeling. And here, this was a group of maybe 16. So they were sociometrically aligned part of the time they could share in the big group. But if they had a group of 30 or 35, they just share in clusters and dyads. The people who are on lonely share together. The people who are on shutdown share together. People who are on content share together. And we know the power of that from the 12-step movement. That is like treating like. So I knew I could rely on that because it works. Like treating like works. That's how people share their experience, strength, and hope. But it was structured and it kept moving. And one of the issues with trauma is that it gets to be a mess. When I was using Psychodrama with trauma, you just get into it and people feel great, kind of cathartic and want to cathartic more. And then they want to get mad at their parents this week and next week and next week. So psychodrama you have to really be deft with it, not to go down like chutes and ladders, all those, get stuck in the pond and stuck in the mud and all that stuff. Sociometrics, the floor checks removes that problem because there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And people walk over to the feeling, and there's, by the way, they are on their feet, engaged, grounded in the room on their own 2 feet, and making choices. All of that counters trauma, which is helplessness, lack of choice, feeling trapped, feeling stuck. So the healing's baked into the model itself and the physical movement around and the choice making and the reaching out towards others for identification. So here's what happens. People get into these clusters and they share a sentence with the people near them, right? About why they're standing where they're standing. And then they're a little triggered. They're naming the feelings they're experiencing. They're translating those feelings into words, and they are putting them out in the world. Done that little process. That's it. It's focused. Then they listen. They're quiet and they listen. And that for trauma is healing too, because traumatized people have trouble listening to emotionally laden material without exploding or imploding. So here, this process is teaching new skills of sharing authentically, listening authentically without, shutting down. But it becomes very evident in a group if you can't listen and you can't make eye contact. Then you can point those things out. Usually you don't have to, though. And the group is small, right? So people who are in a large group, it's a big problem in group therapy when people don't enter in. And if they're all just sitting on folding chairs around the edge, it's hard to enter in. And then you have the problem of the ones who take over or the ones who never share, and all of the things that are just, constants when you're trying to do group therapy. And then, of course, it's up to the therapist to solve all that. Yeah, we haven't heard from you, Scott, for a while, or what are you doing, Leisha? And it's, or whatever, or how to, as a group therapist, I encourage somebody who won't give up the floor to be quiet. These are all group management issues that you get lost in. And then there goes all your energy, and there goes the group. And then the group thinks you can't manage well and blah. It's just a mess. So sociometrics, floor checks in particular, deal with all of that stuff because you just move on to the next question. And if you add role play to a floor check, which I do often, if somebody shares and they're obviously warmed up to talking to themselves, a part of themselves, or a person from their lives, all you have to do is say, would you like to take that into a small role play? If they go, yes, true. So look around the room and choose someone to play you at that age. Okay, what do you want to say to them? Da 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 da. Reverse roles. Da 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 da. So then you might do that for a couple of times, and then you've done your role play. Well, what happens there is the protagonist, the role player, the person who's the protagonist is warmed up, and it's right up here, right? So the therapist doesn't have to go, what do you want to work on? And the protagonist doesn't have to go, oh, I don't know. I mean, but I worked on that last week, and I wish I didn't have to work on it. I feel silly working on it again. All of that kind of stuff that takes away from the meat of the drama. I mean, in a good drama, maybe the drama is this big and you have this much of that trance state really operating in that healing that you can just see. Well, in floor checks, the warm-up is constant. So you just have to be aware and see when that state is entered and do a small role play, and you get often much more benefit. And it's more focused and spontaneous because they're not thinking about what they want to work on. It emerged through the process. So it reduces it. It works with trauma in that way too. There's more opportunity to talk to rather than about. We're not trying to use a secondary process of putting words on what we think is trauma, look back at it, define it, tell a story about it. We're doing it experientially. Right now, I'd like to invite you to stand on a feeling that feels like where you are right now.
Okay, the same feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. And a sentence or two about why you're standing where you're standing, popcorn style. Not everybody has to share. When you're warmed up. In Psychodrama, we work with the warm-up. Share when it's up here and you're warmed up and you want to say it.
I'm feeling very, very cautious and just reluctant because it's such an unusual and different experience. Not sure how I feel. I'm kind of holding a lot of feelings in.
Thanks.
Well, I'm on the other, and I'm feeling similar to Stephen, but I'm feeling quite curious because I have no idea how this is going to transpire and what feelings it may kick up for me myself. So I'm just really curious.
Move to another question. What feeling do you have trouble feeling? What feeling do you like to kind of block or avoid feeling? What do you know? What do you avoid feeling? What do you not want to feel? What feeling you want to keep at a distance? Okay, who's warmed up?
Rage is the one that I don't. Well, I'm smiling often. That's what I do. That's actually when I feel rage, I smile. One of my mechanisms. I instantly go to something like as far away. I don't want anyone to think like I'm not rageful. But it's even just difficult just saying it and sort of standing in it. And it seems to be connected to so many other things: sadness and resentment. It's like a swirling sort of sensation, sad, and even joy, sadness, anger, resentment, joy. Rage is just like,
Thanks, Sam.
As I was standing here, I was realizing I just lost one of my coworkers, died suddenly, and that's very much present with me too. And you know, I'm kind of annoyed that I'm here right now because I'm very much somebody who I'd rather feel rage than nothing, you know, and I want to be able to identify my feelings and to articulate them. So, you know, I want to avoid being numb, you know, and I spent many years in this place, and it's very uncomfortable.
Well, I'm having a lot of trouble coming to terms with fear. My life has been run by fear. My decisions, I mean, really significant decisions like getting married were run by fear. And I'm aware that I spend a lot of my time being vigilant about avoiding fear, which means avoiding a lot of the time other people's feelings. I'm spending a lot of my time being afraid of other people's rage, but of other people's sadness too. There's very strong emotions from other people. I find I have to protect myself from, and it's just such a cage. This fear thing is such a cage that I know that I've self-medicated over big time.
Yes. Whoever feels like it, whoever's warmed up, doesn't have to be everybody.
I will share. When I first heard the question, I heard it as, which of these feelings do you avoid? And I couldn't decide because there's a lot. And then you reworded the question, and it was, which of these feelings do you have the most difficulty with? And this was very apparent. And I'm not sure why, but I know that that is definitely one of the ones. Loneliness could hit me so quickly and just so deep, and so, but it was interesting how everything was a blur, and then I reworded it, this stood out.
people know.
Yeah, that was the same thing for me, because I heard the difference in how the question was presented. And my first response was the one that I am probably more afraid to express, would be the sadness and anger, but then when it was switched the other way, it would be the fear and the anger that are difficult.